The road of no return. Real stories of those who got lost on road trips. Have you ever driven for hours, in the middle of the night, on that empty road that seems endless? That moment when you look at the GPS and it just stops working. No signal. No reference. And you think, it's okay, I just need to keep going until I find a sign. But the signs don't appear. And the road continues. And continues. And continues. Until you see something. Something that shouldn't be there. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about the road of no return. Real stories of people who got lost on road trips. Those who took the wrong turn and found something that wasn't on the map. If you're someone who loves road trip stories, but the kind that makes you think twice before taking that deserted road at night, hit the subscribe button now. And leave a like if this video makes you question every trip you've ever taken. Because what I'm about to tell you today is not fiction. These are documented accounts, police investigations, testimonies from people who survived to tell the tale. And they all have something in common. A road, a choice, and something waiting at the end of it. Look, let's start with a case that happened in 1987 on the rural roads of Missouri. Her name was Sarah Collins, 28 years old, a nurse, driving from Kansas City to St. Louis to visit her sick sister. Simple trip, 5 hours, known route. She left at 3 in the afternoon on a sunny October Saturday. She called her sister at 4:30, saying everything was fine and that she would stop at a gas station to fill up. Sarah never arrived. The thing is, when you hear a story like this, the first thing that comes to mind is kidnapping, right? Robbery. Some violent crime on the side of the road. And that's exactly what the police thought. But here's what most people don't realize about the Sarah Collins case. She wasn't kidnapped on the roadside. She was found, alive, 3 days later, 240 kilometers away from the route she should have taken, inside her own car, parked in the middle of a forest where there were no roads. Yeah, you heard that right. Her car was in the middle of a densely wooded area, surrounded by centuries-old trees with no trail, no path, no explanation for how a 2-ton vehicle could have gotten there. And Sarah? Sarah was sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the steering wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead, catatonic. When the paramedics found her, she was dehydrated in a state of profound shock. She didn't respond to questions. She didn't blink. She just stared. They took her to the hospital. 3 days of hospitalization, 4 fluids, psychiatric observation. And when Sarah finally started talking again, what she said didn't make any sense. She said she was driving normally, that she saw a sign indicating a detour because of road construction. She followed the detour. It was a dirt road, she told investigators. But it was well marked. It had those orange construction signs, you know? I thought it was just a temporary alternate route. Sarah said she drove on this dirt road for about 20, maybe 30 minutes. And then, the trees started getting denser, closer. She tried to turn around, but there was no space. The road had become too narrow, and when she looked in the rearview mirror, the road she had come from was no longer there. Just trees, as if the forest had closed up behind her. Now you might be thinking, Nick, she obviously panicked, got disoriented, and imagined all this. And I thought the same thing. Until I found out the details of the police report. Because there's something they found on Sarah's car that shouldn't have been there. Marks. Deep scratches. All over the car's bodywork. On both sides. As if something, or someone, had dragged sharp objects along the entire vehicle while Sarah was inside. Investigators thought they were tree branches. Made sense, right? She was in the middle of the forest. But when they analyzed the scratches more closely, they discovered something unsettling. The scratches weren't random. They were methodical, parallel lines, evenly spaced, as if something with 5 fingers had scraped its nails across the car's bodywork. Repeatedly. 4 hours. And there's more. The odometer on Sarah's car. When she left Kansas City, It read 87,453 kilometers. When they found her, it read 87,891. She had driven 438 kilometers in 3 days, without moving from the spot, as if the car had been in constant motion, inside that forest, for 72 hours. Sarah Collins never drove again. She developed a deep, uncontrollable terror of roads. Any road. Even today, more than 30 years later, she can't get into a car without having a panic attack. And when she was asked, years later, in an interview for a local documentary, what she remembered about those 3 days, she said only one thing: I wasn't alone in the car. Look, I know this story is hard to swallow. I get it. Closing forest. Unexplained scratches. Odometer that doesn't make sense. But here's what truly bothers me about the Sarah Collins case. She wasn't the first. And she wasn't the last. This is where it gets really interesting. Because when you start researching cases of people who disappeared, or almost disappeared, on rural roads in the United States, you find a pattern. A pattern no one wants to talk about. I spent weeks scouring police reports, old news stories, discussion forums. There are at least 37 documented cases between 1978 and 2019 of people who left for a normal road trip on known routes, followed an unmapped detour or shortcut, disappeared for a period of 48 to 96 hours, were found alive but traumatized in impossible locations, reported the presence of something watching them, and the scariest thing? They all described the same sensation. James Morton, 1981, Nevada. It was like the road knew I was there. Like it wanted me. Rebecca Huang, 1995, Oregon. The harder I tried to get out, the deeper I went. And I could feel something following me in the rearview mirror. Daniel Cortez, 2003, New Mexico. The trees didn't move with the wind. They moved when I looked at them. The question is, what do all these roads have in common? I cross-referenced the data, latitude, longitude, history of the region, and I discovered something. All, and I mean all, these roads were built on land that, at some point in history, was the scene of tragedies, massacres of indigenous tribes, sites of mass executions during the Civil War, areas where criminals buried victims, places where death left a mark. Now you might be thinking, Nick, that's a coincidence. Lots of roads in the US were built over places with heavy history. And you're right. But here's the difference. On all these roads there were reports, long before the modern cases, of travelers disappearing, wagons vanishing, people entering the road and never being seen again. Native Americans even had a name for these places: eating paths. Roads that lead travelers to a place from which there is no return. But of all the cases I've researched, there's one that haunts me. The case of Marcus DeRay, Arizona. Marcus was a truck driver. 19 years on the road. He knew every route, every shortcut, every rest stop between Phoenix and Albuquerque. Experienced man. Professional. Not the type of person to get lost. On the night of September 14, 2007, Marcus was transporting a load of electronics. Simple route. A trip he had done hundreds of times. At 11:47 p.m., he made contact by radio with the distribution center, confirming he was on the right track. Estimated arrival, 3 a.m. At 12:23 a.m., the truck's GPS signal disappeared. The company tried contact by radio. Nothing. By cell phone. Nothing. At 6 a.m., when Marcus didn't arrive, they called the police. Searches were initiated. Helicopters. Sniffer dogs. They checked hospitals, accidents, even the possibility of robbery. Nothing. Marcus DeRay and his 18-wheeler had simply vanished. 5 days later, a farmer called the police. He had found something on his property. A truck. In the middle of a cornfield. 80 kilometers from any road. When the police arrived, what they saw didn't make sense. The truck was intact. Engine off. Doors locked from the inside. And Marcus was in the driver's seat. alive, but completely catatonic, exactly like Sarah Collins. He had lost 15 kilos in 5 days. He had deep marks on his wrists as if he had tried to rip off invisible handcuffs. And his hands were raw, as if he had tried to dig something. 4 hours. Days. Marcus was hospitalized for 2 weeks. When he finally managed to speak, he told a story that doctors classified as trauma-induced psychosis. But I read the full testimony, and what Marcus described isn't psychosis. It's something much worse. Marcus said he was driving normally on I-40. Everything calm. Radio playing. Hot coffee. And then he saw an emergency light flashing ahead. Like an accident. He slowed down. There was no accident. There was a sign. Detour road, work ahead, follow arrows. Marcus followed the arrows. The road began to narrow. The asphalt gave way to gravel. Then dirt. Marcus thought about turning around, but the truck was too big. He needed to find a place to turn. He kept going. Trees started appearing on both sides. Tall. So close that the branches scraped the truck. And then, the truck's headlight illuminated something ahead. A figure. Standing in the middle of the road. Marcus slammed on the brakes. The figure didn't move. It was a woman. White dress. Long hair. Back turned to him. Marcus honked. The woman turned her head. Slowly. Unnaturally. As if her neck had more joints than it should. And when she finished turning, she had no face. Marcus screamed. Slammed on the accelerator. The truck lunged forward. He drove straight past the woman. Or tried to drive past. Because when he looked in the rearview mirror, she was inside the cab. Sitting in the passenger seat. Looking at him. Faceless. But looking. Marcus tried to open the door. Locked. Tried to break the window. Couldn't. Tried to turn on the radio, the cell phone, anything. Nothing worked. And the thing next to him started to lean over. Slowly. As if it was trying to smell Marcus. He said he could feel a coldness. A cold that hurt his bones. And then, she touched his arm. Marcus doesn't remember anything after that. Just waking up in the hospital 5 days later, screaming that he needed to get off the road. Look, when investigators analyzed Marcus's truck, they found a few things inexplicable. First, the truck's tachograph, that device that records speed, driving time, stops, showed that the vehicle was in continuous motion for 74 hours. No stops. No rest. At a constant speed of 60 kilometers per hour. But the truck was found in the middle of a field. Out of fuel. How did it drive for 3 days, without fuel, and still manage to stop in the middle of nowhere? Second, inside the cab they found marks. Scratches. On the ceiling. On the windows. On the dashboard. Marcus had tried to get out. Desperately. He had scratched every surface with his nails until they bled. But here's the detail that gives me chills. There were other marks too. Marks that didn't belong to Marcus. Handprints. On the passenger window. From the inside. Small hands. Feminine. But with fingers too long. Too articulated. And at each fingertip, there was a mark of pressure so strong that the glass was cracked. As if something had pressed hard enough to break tempered glass. The investigators didn't know what to do with it. So they filed the case as psychological trauma induced by isolation and dehydration. But one of the detectives, a man named Richard Holloway, a veteran of the Arizona police force, couldn't let the case go. He started investigating on his own. Richard discovered that the area where the truck was found had a history. In 1884, a family of settlers, the DeVries, disappeared while traveling through the region. They were heading to the Tucson settlement. They never arrived. Weeks later, they found their wagon, empty, in the exact spot where Marcus's truck was found. In 1923, a car with 4 passengers vanished in the same area. In 1956, a school bus with 12 children. In 1978, 3 motorcyclists. All found in the same place. All in a state of shock. None could explain how they got there. Richard Holloway developed a theory. He believed that area, and others like it around the country, were convergence points. Places where something from the other side can cross over. He called them ghost roads. Paths that only appear for certain people, at certain times. And when you enter them, you leave normal reality and enter something different. Most people think Richard went crazy with the investigation. He was removed from the police force in 2009 for erratic behavior. But before he was removed, he did one thing. He mapped all the ghost roads he could identify and put the map online. If you know where to look, you can still find it. But the story doesn't end with Marcus. Because after his case gained attention, even if it was hushed up by the media, other people started sharing their experiences. So, what is happening here? Why do these roads exist? Why do they choose certain people? The truth is this: the world is bigger and stranger than we like to admit. There are places that don't show up on maps. Roads that only exist for certain people at certain moments. And when you enter them, something notices you. Something that is waiting. The question is not if these roads exist. The question is, why do they choose you? Because not everyone gets lost. Not everyone sees the detour. Not everyone follows the signs that shouldn't be there. It's believed that in moments of vulnerability, loneliness, exhaustion, desperation, or emotional stress, the boundaries between our reality and these other layers become thin. And that's when they can reach out and grab you. If there's one thing all these cases teach us, it's this: you are vulnerable, and something is always watching. You must be wondering, what happened to Marcus DeRay, the truck driver they found in the cornfield? Well, after months of recovery, Marcus returned home. But he was never the same. He developed an uncontrollable fear of driving, of roads, of any moving vehicle. He lost his job. His marriage fell apart. He lost his home. He completely isolated himself. Until in 2012, 5 years after the incident, Marcus disappeared again. A month later, they found his body in the same cornfield where his truck was found years earlier. He had walked there, on foot, from the other side of the state. 320 kilometers. No money, no documents, nothing. He just walked, as if something was calling him back. The autopsy revealed that Marcus died of dehydration and exhaustion. But when they analyzed his feet, they discovered something strange. He had no injuries, no cuts, no blisters, no sign that he had walked for over 300 kilometers. It was as if he had been carried and placed there. And there's one last thing. In Marcus's pocket, they found a piece of paper, folded, crushed, covered in dirt. When they opened it, it was a map, hand-drawn, showing roads that didn't exist. And in the center of the map, there was a note, in shaky, almost illegible handwriting. She is waiting. Look, I know this whole conversation seems crazy. Ghost roads, entities, traveling dead. So if you drive at night, if you travel alone, if you take deserted roads, here are some things you need to know. Rules of survival. Trust your instinct. If a road feels wrong, if something inside you is screaming to turn back, listen, turn back. Don't follow detours not on the GPS. If you see a detour sign, but the GPS shows no construction, do not follow it. Find another route, even if it takes longer. Never pick up hitchhikers at night. Never. It may sound cruel, but you don't know who or what is asking for a ride. In many of these cases, the entity needs to be invited in. Don't give it that chance. If you get lost, don't panic. Stay calm. Keep the car moving. Do not stop. Do not turn off the engine. And above all, do not leave the vehicle. If you see something impossible, do not interact. A figure standing in the middle of the road? Don't stop. A child alone at night? Don't stop. An accident with no other people around? Don't stop. Call the police, but keep driving. Because the road of no return It's waiting, and it always will be. The only choice you have is not to enter it. Drive safe, and never, ever follow the road that shouldn't be there.